Hey guys, let's start the show.
For Thursday, August 12th, 2021. Welcome to This Is Only a Test, the official podcast of Tested.com. All will be fixed in post. Don't you worry. All the chimes and the things you hear, it's going to be fixed in post. Welcome to the show this week. Early show, pack show, 3 topics. That's all we're going to talk about this week. I'm Norm here with Jeremy Williams.
Hello.
Jeremy, I love your t-shirt. I
Oh
think
yeah, man.
I've mentioned it before.
Yes.
It's an Atari t-shirt for people just listening to the audio, but it has the word of the name of the company, Atari, in Japanese.
Yeah, isn't that a
underneath.
shame? Because Atari is an American company, and Atari is named for a Chinese game, and yet this is in Japanese. It's all over the place.
Circular pop culture. I mean, it's like that joke in the first Transformers movie when they talk about Japanese robots for the Nokia phones, but that's a Finnish company.
Yeah.
At least it was back then. Yeah. And we have a special guest this week, Davinja Hardwire from Engadget and
Hello.
/Filmcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you after a couple months. How have things been over
Good to see you
still in
guys.
Atlanta, right?
It's doing good. Yeah, I'm outside of Atlanta, and actually, we are now just the Filmcast. We've had a rebranding. We are
Oh.
not part of /Film anymore, but we're doing our own thing. We're a little independent now. So yeah, it's everything's going good. I have 2 weeks of vacation, so I'm like getting towards the end of that. So it's cool to like see you guys and chat for a bit.
Well, thank you for taking
Mhm.
time from your vacation to chat with us. We're going to get right into it because it's going to there's a lot to talk about. The first thing, the biggest story this past week. Well, there are a lot of big stories. First of all, we're not going to talk about this new Samsung event that just happened this morning. These new fold phones. You know, there are other channels that will cover that more in depth.
Right.
A little less interesting for us. But going back to last week, the thing I could not say on the podcast is shortly after recording, I jumped on an airplane, flew up to Seattle, to Bellevue, and visited the good folks at Valve to go hands-on with the Steam Deck. Not the Stream Deck.
You're lucky, man.
The Steam Deck. It was quite a whirlwind, 24 hours. Literally got on a 6 a.m. flight. We had about an hour and a half time with it. Very thankful that the event wasn't canceled because, as we heard, these prototype units were just arriving that week.
Oh wow.
They're the same units that are going out to developers. And so some other outlets, as some of you may know, from PC Gamer, Games Radar, Linus Tech Tips, Tom's Hardware. They were there at The Verge as well. Everyone got some time with it and got a chance to chat with some of the Valve designers about it. But I want to answer your questions as well as up front. I want to get this out front. Proton is not an emulator.
Ah,
There you go.
Yes.
I wish I could have fixed that in post. I had time to fix it in post. Maybe not enough time. It's out there, but Proton is not an emulator. But we can talk about all of that. But first, answer any of your questions that you two may have had about this device.
I think my main one is like, how does it feel? Like that thing looks like a monster. It reminds me of the Wii U gamepad in many ways. Like, yeah, is it basically that?
It's so big.
Yeah,
But
so
also, so that was my primary thing going in, right? With an hour and a half, there's not enough time to do real benchmarks. Benchmarks really, like what I did was able to launch, some of these AAA games they had, Jedi Fallen Order, Doom Eternal, just see what performance natively is like on the default settings. Like games are aware of the screen resolution. They're going to have normal settings. I bumped up the graphics for Jedi Order, didn't see frame hitches. So things look okay there, but ergonomics and usability, that's like the form factor is what they're committing on. It's not just, they chose the screen size. They designed all the buttons because they knew this was what they felt like either the smallest form factor they could get or what they felt was like the sweet spot for form factor with all the input that they want on there. It's big. Like if you thought the Switch was big, and I haven't, tried the new Switch that has that same 7-inch screen, but even with that new Switch, I gotta imagine this is bigger because there are so many more buttons. There's so much more volume on the left and right sides.
I don't think that the case of the new Switch is any bigger. It's just a bigger
No, it's
screen.
the same.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's the
they
same.
just
Okay, so
killed
it's the
those
same form
vessels.
factor. Got it.
Yep.
So this is going to be. I mean, people brought Switches over to do a comparison. Like the nooks of if you think of this kind of handheld device where there's
Mhm.
like the ergonomic handles on the left and the right, and it kind of recedes a little bit underneath, the Switch fits underneath. The entirety of the Switch can fit underneath the Steam Deck, just under where the screen panel is. And that's, it has a big bezel around the screen, and that's due to the fact that they have to have the space for the cooling, right? There's vents, there's heat pipes, it's running essentially PC hardware, right?
Mhm.
Desktop, laptop, PC hardware with the Ryzen. I see that Ryzen logo in the back there, Avengers. So I do want to hear your thoughts on this APU. But this device wouldn't have been possible without AMD making chips at this process size,
For sure.
at this, at 15 watt TDP for just the APU, being able to then push out that many teraflops.
Yeah.
I want to know,
I'm
like, going based off Devinder's question, like, how did it feel? How did the buttons feel?
mhm.
Are they within reach? Do they mash well? Is there a good tactile sensation? Did you ever feel like you were pressing your thumbs wanted to go to the touchpads when they should have been on the analog sticks? Or what are the controls like?
Controls, I mean, I think in terms of button throw and thumbsticks, everything felt kind of like a better version of the Valve Index controllers, honestly. I thought the
Interesting. Okay.
thumbstick was better, definitely felt sturdier than the Valve Index thumbsticks. The place where I felt like I had the most ambiguity about finger placement was actually the paddles on the back. There are two paddles underneath,
Right.
and I'm never sure, are they supposed to be for the pinky and ring finger
Mhm.
or the ring and middle finger? They're more comfortable with the ring and middle finger, but then there's also two trigger buttons that I imagine also uses the middle finger.
Do
So
you guys do paddles work for any of you guys? Like I actually have both generations of the Xbox Elite controller. I never use the paddles. Like they just never feel good. They get in the way of when I'm actually trying to do face button stuff. So I'm not a paddle believer, I think.
Yeah, I
I
don't
think
have
it's
an
it's
Elite
just
controller.
Mhm.
it's probably it's racing games for
Yep.
people who play racing games, right? You're going to use
Yep.
paddles for that, for shifting. It feels like a lot of people, maybe a younger audience who has more malleable younger brains, can
How
use these
dare you?
paddles as a way to do like macros, right? You hold the
Right.
paddle button and then it changes what some of the other buttons do, and it gives you all sorts of functionality. It's like if I can't use one of I'm not a fast text typer, right? I'm like I'm I want to focus on 4 or 5 buttons at most at once,
It's
right?
interesting you make that comparison because my son, I just gave him a mouse for this little laptop, and it's only a 3 button mouse, and he was like,
Mhm.
I don't think I can play my games with this mouse. It's
With
like,
an extra button in the middle.
no, with no buttons on the side.
Oh,
Right.
Right,
really?
like because
Right.
Wow.
he plays Rust and other games that I guess he just that's how he plays the game. He doesn't know how
Yeah.
to do it any other way. So I think you're right. Like there's something to if you grow up with that, all your fingers are attached to a button. You'll learn how to use them.
Youngins.
Well, they're also like MMO mice that have like
Mhm.
10 buttons on the
Yeah.
side
Yeah.
for specifically that purpose. And I think Valve is they want to throw the kitchen sink at it. One, because they feel like that's what this category of audience wants, especially if they're making this for PC gaming, which you're going to want the analogs and the shortcuts for keyboard and mouse. And also they want to find out over time what people gravitate toward and what they're going to make use of, so that when they iterate on this, they can refine that. If you look at the renders of the Steam Deck and even some of the video, you see like on the where the palm rests, there's like a little outline.
Mhm.
My gut was to instinctually think that that where your palm actually touches it, it would be a little more grippy. It would
Right.
have
Right.
like some texture to it, and like rubberized plastic or something. But it wasn't. It was literally just the outline denoting where the palm sits. So I could see like aftermarket sticky, grippy things that you wrap on the Steam Deck just
Yeah.
to have it feel better, because the place where I felt like I was struggling most was when I was touching the screen with one hand and trying to hold the whole 1.46 pound Steam Deck with with my left hand,
That's
essentially.
just so big. I just need to like did it feel like something you could sit with for an hour, holding your arms up? Because I even have sometimes I have issues with that with the Switch sometimes.
Elbows tucked in, elbows on
Mhm.
your knees, maybe the whole thing rested on the top of your knees.
Right, right.
Um, I think for its size, the 1.5-ish pounds actually feels lighter
Mhm.
because it's spread over that wider area. And I think the plastic does not feel as premium, I want to say, as even
Yeah.
like the Valve Index controller plastic. That like really nice finish. Here, I wouldn't say cheap, but I definitely felt like they chose plastic that was lighter to try to
Mhm.
get as much of the weight off of the exterior as possible.
Maybe kind of like the way LG does the Gram computers, which also feel a little flexible, but that's how they get so light. Is that their case material is really unique. Yeah,
And it's not flexibility. I'm not talking about
yeah,
like I mean, it
yeah.
still felt rigid. It just felt like, when you're touching the plastic, I asked them, is this prototype plastic? Is there going to be final finishes? Thinking about that grippy
Right.
surface, but they said this is basically, what this is what they're shipping with, and I think they just chose something, at least whatever materials
Hmm.
injection molded they're doing for that shell, to minimize the weight.
Got it.
So
How did those games run, by the way? Like
Yeah,
you played Jedi, so it's like was that
Jedi, Doom
720p
Eternal. Yeah, so the
high
screen resolution is
settings?
1280 by 800.
Hmm.
That was running native at normal settings and bumping things to like the high epic setting. Um, I don't. It was just at opening
Right,
level, so
right.
optimized for whatever the game is optimized for. Um, let's explain. I think the
Hmm.
audience like there's some clarity because I want to go back to Proton is not an
Yes.
emulator. Like how like the promise of all your Windows games running on this. I know I asked a lot of questions about loading Windows on this because they're also selling this as a full PC.
Hmm.
So I could see a whole category of people wanting to buy this as a computing device too, right? They can also plug in USB to their dock, get a keyboard mouse, plug in HDMI to their monitor, and load up, dual boot. You can absolutely dual boot with this. There's going to be a combination of buttons you press as you boot it up to get into a boot menu or their version of a BIOS. But the vast majority of people probably going to stick on Linux. And the truth is, the Linux Steam experience is out there already. Steam OS, right? And Steam Play, the way they run Windows games, is something if you have a computer, you can download right now and run that build of Linux on your computer and see how games perform on your hardware. Like you can do those benchmarks honestly right now with with the Ryzen CPU also. Um, It runs games. So Proton is a fork of Wine,
Hmm.
which is a compatibility layer that's been long running to run Windows x86 applications in Linux. Wine stands famously for Wine is not an emulator, right? It's recursive that way. And Proton as a fork of Wine is specifically designed for Windows games to run on Steam. They did this probably as a response to Steam machines, part of the Steam machine initiative, right? And as a compatibility layer, the way it differs from running as an emulator is that it's not simulating Windows
Hmm.
as a like you would like an arcade game. It's just brute force replacing the API calls. And they've kind of reverse engineered this game will need to pull from this library, this DLL set, this graphics set that typically is in Windows, and it redirects that to the equivalent for Linux. And the way Proton has been emulated, there's been a whitelist of games so far. Like these are the games Valve is sure it works as they do the internal development. Uh, the promise here with Steam Deck, though, is that it won't just be this select whitelist of games that Proton users and Linux and SteamOS users have had access to so far, but it will be the entire back catalog of Windows games. And that feels new. And that
Hmm.
feels like something that either they have some confidence in how they've implemented Proton to allow that backward compatibility.
That stuff just sounds like magic, though. It sounds a little like a South Park gnome thing of just like, hey, we got your games and they're gonna run. Don't worry
We got
about
your
it. Don't
games. We
worry
got your
about how that
people.
works. I'll never trust a company that says something like that, basically. So I guess I'll wait and see. It's like, does Linux have support for every DirectX 12 call? That
Well, there you
seems
go.
like, what
So
do you do?
DirectX call, right?
Yeah.
DirectX 9 to 12 gets adapted to Proton via DXVK,
Okay.
which is DirectX to Vulkan. And that is, if you're an old school gamer, that's a wrapper.
I
Do you
remember
remember
that.
wrappers?
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember glide wrappers remember when Voodoo FX cards that had only ran on, not OpenGL, but the glide version of OpenGL. When Voodoo FX went away, if you wanted on your NVIDIA card to play the accelerated, Quake 1 or Quake 2, you had to install a glide wrapper. And those were open source because, 3DFX, as they were bought by NVIDIA, they put out all their APIs out there. So NGlide and all that
Hmm.
stuff. So DXVK is essentially a wrapper that then allows DirectX or to run on Vulkan, which is Linux and Proton native.
So many
And
steps, so many steps.
and
Yeah.
that's why you'll see in some of these comments, and people will say who are devoted to Linux gaming, games that are built Vulkan native, like Doom Eternal
Hmm.
and Hades, actually theoretically can run even faster on Linux, on SteamOS, than in Windows, because it was built for that platform. And you lose some of that overhead with Windows. And maybe that's why Doom Eternal and Hades were two of the games that were preloaded on these hands on devices
For
that
sure.
we got to try out.
I wonder because all the graphic stuff is getting so complicated, right? Like you have on Nvidia side, you have things like DLSS, you have ray tracing, and AMD like just announced like their what DLSS kind of competitor, was it Super
Yeah.
Fidelity? Do we know if that technology will work with this? Will you get some of those benefits on Steam Deck?
They indicated yes. They indicated
Okay.
like they're working very tightly with AMD, including the driver packages. Everything will be console-like. You just update system hardware, system a big system update, and you get your motherboard drivers, your all your graphics drivers. It's a thing that like Switch owners and PSP and Vita owners never had to think about for updates to the graphics. You just get the whatever OS version of
Hmm.
Switch. This will be like that for Steam OS, but that's why I asked the Windows question
Yeah,
for
yeah.
people who are going to run Windows. What is that driver package going to look like? Um, and maybe as much as they say this is a PC and you could install Windows, they don't really. I don't get the sense that they really care, right? They'll make sure it works, but Valve has been kind of anti-Windows for a long time. So like as long as it works well on Linux, I think that's what the users will care about. I do think if I see people on like on our Steam Deck and people who are interested in Steam Deck thinking about coming from a Switch as well, right? Like
Hmm.
they either want to buy a new PS5 or buy a Switch or buy as their first serious gaming PC. And I think those are the people who are going to have to reckon with the fact that some of the interface here and some of the compatibility stuff is going to require a little more patience to run. It's not going to be as seamless. Hopefully it will, but as I experienced it, it wasn't as seamless as a just any console, just the
Sure, sure.
console experience because
I'm thinking like
games aren't being made for this.
even versus a cheap gaming laptop too. Like I'm a big fan of Dell's G series. I think like the G5, 15, and 13. Those things you could get them for around $800 now, and even cheaper refurbed or older models. You get really decent gaming performance there, and it's a computer. You could do whatever you want with it. So I wonder how much of the handheld nature of this is going to really sell it for a lot of people. Is it really only I can't imagine people doing this as their first gaming PC because it's so limited in that way.
I don't
I
know.
think
I
there's
think I
this.
think the portability factor is pretty massive. I mean, you're right. You have to.
Yeah.
There are laptops out there that are a little bit more expensive that have just as good gaming,
Much
as systems.
better, I'd say. Like I think they perform far better. Yeah.
But
Well, that's the bet,
but then
right?
you have
That's
to lug around
Mhm.
the gamepad and you have to lug around maybe a mouse and
Mhm.
it's a bag that you have everything in that's over your shoulder. And you're right. You can do other things on it. You can browse the web and whatever else you want to do.
Mhm.
But this, I think, the reason that they're making this is because the Switch has sold 80 million units, and they
Mhm.
realize that there's something to that. I mean, you can probably lug around an Xbox with you too, and a small TV and a gamepad if you wanted to bring that on
Yeah.
vacation.
But
But
it's a far like what's the difference? It's a difference between like a 5 to 6 pound laptop versus this 1.5 pound thing. Did you see the AC adapter, Norm? Like how big is that?
yeah, I didn't measure the size of what plugs into the wall, but it's going to be a standard. It's USB-C, so
Okay.
there's only one USB-C port, and something after thinking about it for a while, I wish there were two USB-C ports, one for power and then one for the a dock
Mhm.
and accessories. And it's mounted at the top. The switch is mounted in the bottom. It's debatable. They have a hinged USB or a hinge, like an
Mhm.
angled USB-C connector for their dock, but it's going to be a standard like 65-watt power supply. You can run lower wattage, wall warts on it, but it just won't charge as fast
Gotcha.
as it's going to consume the power.
So like a
Um,
MacBook Pro power brick would be enough to
Yes.
power that thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Something
It's
like
not
that.
gonna be a
Okay.
big laptop thing. But going
Right.
back to, this purchasing decision, right? The
Mhm.
value proposition here, in the same way that laptops are positioned as full-fledged PCs and people buy a laptop instead of a PC, but they're paying either they're trade-offs for battery life, but for portability, that's the value of the laptop, the versatility of that. You have that extra step here where it's just for gaming.
Hmm.
And I think in the same way that a lot of people who buy laptops don't use their computer maybe necessarily in the full way, an entry level laptop, the same way you could a full desktop PC, people buying the Steam Decks, the vast majority of them are not going to use these in the same way you would even a laptop or a
For sure.
PC. But the
Yeah.
potential is there. Um,
I have a
People have asked
pre-order in
about.
too, so I'm not like a full non-believer. I don't know if I'll keep that pre-order, but it's more like I'm
Oh,
interested
I'm
in what
sure you can
Valve's
flip
doing. Yeah,
it.
exactly. I'm interested in what Valve's doing. I just don't know how much like this vision will actually pay off for them because yeah, the Switch has been successful. This thing is so much bigger, so much more complicated, and I forget if I've talked with you guys about this, but we've seen concepts like this from other people. Alienware at the last CES, it actually happened. They showed off their UFO concept, which looked
Right.
massive and ugly. Like this, the Steam Deck at least looks more elegant than that. But we're going to see a bunch of these things. I'm not sure if this is the one that'll succeed, but I guess Valve is Valve, and they can afford to just try. Yeah.
Norm,
And I hate making the
Mhm.
comparison, but you can think of Apple having a reality distortion field, or they
Yeah.
have enough power and clout in their industry to get other people on board.
Hmm.
In the same way here, Valve has that freedom where whatever they do, gamers are going to take notice.
Except Steam
And you,
Deck, right? Like
eh,
Steam Deck, or sorry, not the Steam
Steam machines.
machines is the
But
thing
people
that
took notice because they
yeah,
assume that they've done all the R&D. They've thrown
yeah.
away more prototypes than they've put out in the public. They have that luxury of time and money.
Hmm.
So whatever they put out there, you assume has been vetted through their iterative development process.
Hmm.
can we talk about loading times real quick?
Yeah,
Yes.
The difference between the entry level SKU and the second is much faster hard drive.
yeah.
Were you able to compare that?
We only had the 512 gigabyte, the high end SKU, which has that M.2 PCIe, the faster storage. I felt that loading time was less dependent on the storage and more, at least in Jedi Fallen Order, the DXVK
Right.
caching compiling for Vulkan, which I assume only happens the one time. It was you see loading times on. I don't have a new next gen consoles. I don't know how fast the load is on a PS5 or new Xbox, but it felt comparable to loading times on a game
Mhm.
console. For a
The
high end
PS5
game.
stuff, like it feels almost impossible. Like
Right.
what
Mm.
Sony did there, especially with a game like Ratchet and Clank. Like I pop that in, I turn that on, start the game, and within like under 10 seconds, like I'm there, in the game. It loads maps so quickly. I think like the PC side of things, we're waiting for some of that tech. Was it direct memory access? Like we're waiting for some things to get better to kind of offer those speed bumps. Did they do we know? Can you plug an NVMe into the base SKU?
They say you will not get
Yeah.
the storage is technically replaceable for service purposes, but not user replaceable. It'll void the warranty.
Yeah.
So we'll have to
Reddit
wait for
Reddit is like
teardowns.
hold my coffee. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
we'll be able to figure
everyone
this
will
out.
tear it apart.
Yeah, and then the eGPU question, it will not support eGPUs as I understand it because there's no Thunderbolt, right? The USB
Yep.
C slot doesn't have access to. There's no Thunderbolt controller that they're implementing in this, so no PCIe lanes.
Yep.
So you won't be able to pump a big graphics card in this. So we
That's a
don't know.
whole
Like, yeah,
That's a whole
yeah.
other topic, by the way. I don't know if you guys have really fleshed out eGPUs at all, but it is a thing I followed for so many years, and like it keeps failing to take off because of like the complexity of it. And to me, it feels like okay, this is a way to make PC gaming, a little more portable, a little more maybe even accessible to cheaper machines. But the boxes are so expensive, the
So
connectivity is
expensive.
never quite there. It just doesn't make sense. I almost feel like this is a reflection, a similar thing we're seeing. But hey, we're going to have a new trend of tiny portable gaming PCs. There are those things, the emulator boxes that look like Game Boys that are selling all over the place right now. So, this is the trend right now. I just want to hack my Vita, honestly, like bring that thing back because I love that hardware.
And there are things like the IO
Hmm.
the version, and Linus Tech Tips had that there. That runs Windows, it runs AMD, but not the new Ryzen 2 chip,
Hmm.
RDNA 2 chip. So you get a sense that OEMs have the ability to build versions of this, and Valve is not. They're not banking on that the way they were hoping Steam machines would pan
Hmm.
out with partnerships with OEMs. If they need to push this through to the end, they will do that. because they have the hardware experience and manufacturing chops that they've built up with Steam Controller and Valve Index to deliver hundreds of
Hmm.
thousands of units. The bigger business question is always at play, right? They are doing this as a way to bolster Steam's store. As a developer, let's say this thing becomes a wild success. Let's say 10 million units, just throwing a random number out there, which is a significant user base. As a developer, at what point are you incentivized to start thinking about Steam Deck as a
Right.
platform to optimize for at the beginning of your dev cycle? Um, or if you're a developer who has existing games in the library, are you incentivized like indie games to optimize for Steam Deck, hoping that you're going to get more sales? Or are those 10 million users just a subset of existing PC gaming audience who've bought the game, and you, as a developer, don't see additional revenue
Hmm. Hmm.
from that? Right? It makes Steam a more robust and ever present part of gamers' lives. But what does from an EA to Supergiant Games? What is their incentive to develop for this in the same way that you would specifically develop for a game console?
Yeah. I mean, ideally, it shouldn't be a huge difference, right? Ideally, it's just going to convince them to like push more stable, more well-rounded Steam editions of their games. But like, yeah, I'm sure there will be some optimizations to be done. Um, yeah. The other thing is like, has anybody explored like Xbox Game Pass streaming on one of these things yet? Because all that takes is a
It's
web
another
browser,
reason
right?
that Windows.
Yep.
I mean, and it's
Or just the web browser,
yeah,
right? You
yeah.
could just do it over Linux. So like there is like a good multifunction use for a machine like this, even if it's just a streaming box too, and not using the hardware that's built in.
And they've tested streaming on this
Hmm.
because Steam streaming, even
Right.
that dramatically extends the battery life. They toyed with the idea of making a device that was just for streaming in the same way that the old NVIDIA Shield was. But they thought that having dedicated hardware was an important part of the experience.
Sure.
And part of that could be the just confluence of timing with AMD having this chipset
Hmm.
available.
If this came out 5 years ago, it would just be a streaming box, I'd imagine, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas
It'd be
now we have, yeah,
it'd be a Steam Link with a gamepad on it.
exactly. Then that's
Yeah.
what I was thinking. It
Yeah.
could be, but yeah, this seems like it's no wonder they've kind of given up on the Steam Link because this seems like the best evolution of that.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see.
I mean, there's no reason why an OEM couldn't make that device a Steam Link.
Hmm.
Put a Kickstarter style OEM could put controllers with a screen that just runs Steam Link. Like that
But
is that
yeah, then
maybe
just get a
charge
backbone for your
$100 for that.
phone. Get a
Exactly,
backbone.
Right,
Get a
exactly. Then you just put a
Razer
controller. Yeah,
Kishi. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. How are those actually? I haven't used one of those.
They're fantastic. Oh my god, you guys need
Mm,
to. I have both. I've been testing a Razer Kishi. That one feels a little flimsy. I don't like the buttons so much, but the backbone. If anybody out there has an iPhone, just buy a backbone because
really?
it feels fantastic. It feels like a great game controller. Literally anything like Game Pass streaming or iOS games, like you play them like a Switch. That's it. It's
Huh.
easy.
Well, there you go. If you're on
Mhm.
the fence about whether you're going to play PC games on your couch or in the
Yes, get a
bathroom,
backbone.
get a backbone, run the Steam app, stream your PC games, and if you can't find enough games or reason to play those games in that portable in your home over Wi-Fi, then you probably don't need a Steam Deck right now,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely.
If I could jump back to input for 1 minute, you played Doom Eternal. Would you
Yeah.
play that using gamepad controls or using the touchpads?
I tried both, and honestly, I like the gamepad controls more because I didn't calibrate this touchpad to my liking. They had it on the trackball mode, which has acceleration built in, and they're very proud of that trackball
Mhm.
simulation. But that wasn't for me. I'm not a trackball
Mhm.
Especially on
user.
a handheld device. That sounds like a
Yeah.
nightmare. Oh man.
I mean, you think about the ergonomics of Steam controller, which they had
Mhm.
those nice big round pads, but you had less pressure on your other fingers. Your thumbs could
Yeah.
focus on being precise. Here, my fingers are a little more tensed up because there's so many buttons and I'm holding the weight of the controller. And so I just like the responsiveness, the physical haptic
Mhm.
feel of the touchpads. And I think I said in my video the haptic feel of the touchpad versus the thumbstick. The touchpad did not feel as good as it did in the Steam controller.
Hmm.
I like the thumbsticks more. Is what I'm saying
Mhm.
in this case. Yeah, yeah. people have done renders of just putting the two sides of the Steam Deck together as a new Steam controller,
Uh
and
huh.
I mean, ergonomics is the bigger question. The biggest question I think here. Performance is going to be as it is. That will improve over time. But what they decide going forward, is this their ideal form factor for controls and size? Is we got to hope they got it right this first gen.
I almost
Yeah.
this is one of those devices where I look at it and I'm like, I think the second gen is going to be the thing that really hits home. Whereas this seems like a really interesting experiment. And hey, I'm all for it because we got to experiment to kind of get to the better things. I have my concerns because it's Valve, and I still remember Steam machines, and I still remember like the hype around that, and how I've talked to people at like Alienware and other companies that are like, yeah, we spent a lot of time like really thinking
Mm.
about that, and Valve just screwed us over. I don't know how much they can keep doing that.
It's funny. They say they will continue working on this as long as there's interest from the
Yep.
consumers and internal interest.
Hmm.
And based on pre-sales, that trajectory looks good going forward. For everyone who bought a Valve Index and is hoping for a Valve Index 2, I don't know if we're going to get one.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. And if you have more questions about Steam Deck, post them in the comments and I'll do my best to address them. Hashtag Proton is not an emulator. Not an emulator. Okay. Suicide Squad is our second topic this week. This is a massive HBO Max plus theatrical release. I know we only have about 10 minutes left for you, Jeremy. So let's talk about impressions of the film itself. And we're
Yep.
not going to go into full spoilers. Let's
Nah.
not go into full spoilers.
All right.
Yeah, it's not needed.
Jeremy, what'd you think?
Wait, Devendra, did you not like it?
No, did you say in terms of
Oh
the
no,
movie?
I saying yeah about the spoilers. I think we're fine going into spoilers on a movie
Okay.
that's available at
let's
home
go.
in the
Okay,
theaters.
Fine. Let's
Everywhere
get the
else.
spoiler
'Cause,
light.
a lot of people die. A lot of people die. But yes,
Yeah.
spoiler.
Here we go. Spoilers.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting movie. It's an interesting DC movie in particular. It's not a complete and utter failure in that respect, which is interesting. And I liked I liked that they did a little different. I liked the R-rated superhero approach. That was not the same direction that Deadpool took. Much more gory, which is worth talking about because this new level of realistic gore being something that is in a widely watched movie, not the horror genre. I think that's a really interesting new direction that the film industry is taking,
Is
especially
that
with
new? I saw
yeah.
RoboCop as a kid. I
Right.
mean,
Do you think that they compare?
yeah, absolutely. Like the scene where Murphy's arm gets blown off, like that RoboCop is a brutal movie. And
Or RoboCop 2 when they take a brain out of
oh my
of
god,
Kane and put him in a
yes.
robot.
I don't. It's not a new direction. It is more James Gunn is a guy coming from like the trauma, background of really cheap, gross indie movies and B grade horror in movies and sci-fi and things like that. And he's just brought a lot of that element here. I don't know if you guys have seen Slither. Was that his movie?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great
So there's
movie.
the name of the
Nathan
game. Great
Fillion.
movie
Yeah,
with
yeah, yeah.
Nathan Fillion. I love that, and also super gross and also super gory too. And I think that was a point where James Gunn had said, like, I'm never doing a practical effects movie again because this was a nightmare.
Hmm.
Go watch Slither, everybody. I don't know if it's a new direction, but I do think it is a fun thing to see him. Like, I wonder what the negotiations for James Gunn was with Warner Brothers, right? Was it just like, we will let you do whatever you want for the love of
I think
God?
that's what I think
Yeah.
that's what exactly what it was.
Yeah.
The story that everyone knows in Hollywood, right? James Gunn was fired from Guardians
Yep.
Murphy's of course back making Guardians 3, but in the interim period, Warner Brothers saw an opportunity to get the guy who made Guardians to make the film that they wanted to be Guardians, which was the Suicide
For sure.
Squad.
For sure.
The first Suicide Squad, David Ayer directed, which is not without its storied post production problems and editing issues. Warner Brothers wanted Guardians of the Galaxy with their cast of misfit villains, and
And they got it. Yeah.
they got it, and I
They
think
pretty
that's
much got
why
it.
from all reports, James Gunn got to do whatever he wanted on this because
You could
they
tell.
got the director that they wanted.
You could tell, and maybe it's that freedom because like there's whole drama around David Ayer too. He released a statement about his cut, and basically that his film was basically butchered by Warner Brothers. I think the story is like basically a trailer making company kind of re-edited that movie and plugged in like new footage and new scenes. So that's why that movie feels incomprehensible, but it made a ton of money. So I guess success for Warner Brothers there. This one, I really like this movie, but I do feel like something is missing. This movie almost feels like literally a vacation for James Gunn, like away from the safe confines of the MCU and the Disney like machine. And this is just like, I want to go to the beach and I want to blow up some heads. I want to make things really gory and
Get all
crazy.
my
I think,
friends,
yeah,
get some
hang out with his friends.
cameos
That's it.
in.
It has a
Yeah,
light touch to it, but I do think it has a good balance of like the things James Gunn does really well, which is balance is sort of like gross out humor at times and like grossness, violence, but alongside like actual heart and
so much
general
heart, so
a
much
lot of
heart.
heart. But for this movie, I almost feel like a lot of it feels forced. A lot doesn't feel
Mm.
organic in a way. So I like this movie. There's some set pieces that are fantastic. It is hilarious all the way through. Harley Quinn is like perfect, and I think the ultimate like big bad battle actually feels unique and different for like a third act. It's not just like laser shooting to the sky thing from an MCU movie. It feels unique and it feels different. But there's so many elements of this that don't quite gel for me. So not a perfect movie, but I think you can tell like James Gunn basically had like what, a year or like a chunk of time to really do this fun thing on his own, maybe get a lot of this stuff out of his system. And it's fun to see, it's unique at
I,
least.
I agree with you that Harley Quinn was good, but I thought
Yeah.
Ratcatcher 2 stole the show. I thought
Love
she was
Oh
Ratcatcher
yeah,
2, love Polka Dot Man, like
yeah.
love
yeah.
love that crew. Yeah.
Taika
But
Waititi's just brief cameo, like just sealed the deal there.
Uh-huh.
I think he does a great. I think some of the reasons that you say might feel forced because you have to grow to know obscure characters, fall in love with them, and then be sad when they die
I
potentially in
feel
the span of 2
manipulated.
hours.
Yeah.
It's like they
At
had
a certain point.
it's a lot of things to pack in. You don't have the
Mhm.
luxury of the long tail of storytelling here. I love that this villain, like he is between getting Ego in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 to work as a
Mhm.
weird character on screen to Starro here, which we never thought would work as a live action thing, but was terrifying and the CG looked amazing. It was such. I think they nailed it with the quote unquote big bad, the monster here, the kaiju.
Mhm.
They had a kaiju in a DC superhero movie.
yeah, I question the point about heart like being consistent though, because there's that scene with the freedom fighters that was played for comic relief where the heroes walk through this
Probably
village. They
the
and they ki-
best gag in the movie.
and
Like
they
it
kill
was good.
and they kill everybody. They
Yeah,
kill
kill
and
everybody.
they think that they're captors or
Uh-huh.
and they're trying to rescue their friend, and then they get to the end and he reveals that they had saved him, and everybody's dead now, and it's that's it's played for comedy, but
Mhm.
you watch that, and I don't know about you guys, but I kind of had a sneaking suspicion that these weren't bad guys.
Oh yeah.
They didn't look
Nobody
like
was
it.
fighting back, really.
Right. And I don't know if there's not a ton of heart there if like there is when Harley Quinn is on her rampage and there's
Mhm.
flowers spewing out of her and she's killing
Very
everybody.
Well,
Deadpool
by
like.
by heart, I mean it's sort of like Harley Quinn gets her side story, right? She gets to hang out with the new president, and they have a whirlwind romance, and then
Yeah.
like she kills him, which was a surprise to me, like how that happened, and that is entirely rooted in character. That's entirely rooted in everything we know from Harley Quinn, from like the crappy Suicide Squad movie, but also the history of Harley Quinn and Joker. And even Birds of Prey. Like I feel like there's a lot of that character in here too. So that all clicked, that connected. But the stuff with like Idris Elba's character and his daughter, which they're just going back and forth, saying F you" to each other. I get the stakes of what they're doing, but I don't. First of all, it feels literally like what they did with Will Smith in the last movie, and that barely worked for me. So it's stuff like that, where at least every character kind of gets their moment and they get a little heart to them. Maybe it's because another great gag is that the entire first team in this movie gets wiped out, including a lot of the big names we were expecting from the first movie and new characters and stuff. So that was fun. Like I like those fun rug pull moments, but it almost seems like there's too much of those, or maybe too much. I think Bilga Iberi at Vulture had a really great review about this, where like maybe a little Suicide Squad works more than a lot of Suicide Squad. You know?
Mm. Yeah, these are psychopaths and sociopaths,
Yeah.
and to give them any measure of depth from a humanoid shark, right, sitting alone in a van, like these are the moments that I think
Yeah.
really help make the movie in a way that we may not have seen from a different director.
And great voice work by Stallone.
Oh my
It
god.
also feels,
Yeah.
in many ways, like James Gunn is repeating the Guardians formula, which I also think like
Hmm.
makes you kind of feel the artifice of this. Like
Right.
Groot and Vin
Everyone
Diesel
is Groot.
were
Everyone is
everyone
Drax.
is Groot. Yeah, it feels like Groot was such an interesting character, and Vin Diesel like just doing his voice, like it made us feel so much for that character. Whereas King Shark, he's great. I like what Stallone did here, but it feels like the same thing all over again. Yeah.
There's definitely a little bit of that. I think DC fans, though,
Hmm.
more than happy that this is something that
They'll
they get
take
to
whatever they can
enjoy
get.
in their universe. And I hope some of these characters, like Ratcatcher 2
Sure,
and like a Bloodsport, get to live on. John Cena's character, Peacemaker, is
sure.
going to have his own HBO Max show. So they're going to, I think fans of the quote unquote DCEU are happy that this actually revitalizes some of that shared
I
universe.
don't can b- I don't know if I want to see his show anymore. Like as much as I like the character in John Cena, like I did not expect to see him basically be the person that the government was actually put in
Yeah.
charge to make sure everything goes. And I did not see him killing Rick Flag. I like Joel Kinnaman a lot. I think he's fun in these movies. That was surprising to me. So I don't do I care about Peacemaker now? I don't know.
Hopefully you're
Mhm.
supposed to. All right, Jeremy, I know you got a jet.
Got a
Thank you,
jet.
Jeremy. Devindra and I will tackle our last topic, but end spoilers for the Suicide Squad.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
See you, Jeremy. I will say that the other thing that came out of this, of course, is its success at the box office or lack of success
Hmm.
and discussion around that. There's been, it made like under 30 million, which is even below some of the tracking and expectations. It's a rated R film, of course, which I think that kind of tilts it. But the HBO Max strategy, like
Hmm.
this is absolutely a thing that they can't double dip anymore. They
I,
can't
I
double
I
dip
don't
in the
know.
same way.
The pandemic's getting worse. The headlines are everywhere, and I know a lot of people who would absolutely go to the theater to see this. Like if this was a month or two ago, I know a lot of people were like
Yeah.
trying to like go back to the theaters. I was happy to like go to like barely empty screenings. I saw Scott Pilgrim's Dolby re-release was fantastic. I saw The Green Knight and a whole bunch of things.
Mm.
I had
In
second
online for one night
thoughts
only.
online. So yeah, hey, by the way, folks, watch The Green Knight. It's fantastic.
August
Um,
18th.
August 18th is worth $20. But going back to the theater, as much as I love James Gunn and I want to see this movie in the biggest screen possible, the math didn't quite work out because the pandemic is roaring back. The Delta variant is making things really tough, and I think that had a big effect here too. Like
Absolutely.
we had a window of time for Fast Nine to really to kind of get a decent box office result, and I think there were a couple other movies that did pretty well too. But
Black Widow and Fast 9, I think,
yeah,
made the most out of that window.
yeah. But we can't
Yeah.
expect miracles, especially when
Yeah.
like society has decreed that people don't want to take care of each other anymore, So, yeah.
Yeah, in that vein, AMC has signed a deal with Warner Brothers and Warner Brothers with other theater chains as well to bring back the exclusivity window, 45-day window
Mhm.
for going forward. And that feels a little long with this new precedent. 2 weeks feels a little more appropriate, especially for a summer or winter when 2 weeks is most of what people
They
for
yeah.
theaters at big movies only really have 2 weeks of the
Mhm.
in the box office to make a lot of their money. But they signed that 45-day
Sure.
window. So after Dune and Matrix, right, this year, we'll have to, they'll still be on HBO
Mhm.
Max, but I don't know how that, if it's going to be like the free for 1 month on HBO Max. Like you can tell they're still trying to have their
Yeah.
cake and eat it too, and
I
have
think they
people,
want
yeah.
I think they want next year to be better, right? They're praying like, okay, maybe we can still have people in theaters. Have you gone back to theaters at all,
I have
Norm?
not. No.
So the thing, I don't feel as much sympathy for them anymore because going back over the last couple of weeks, there are big signs on all the doors I see here at Regal and AMC's in Georgia saying masks not required. Like
Wow.
that's your signage that don't worry, customers, we're not going to force you to wear a mask. You can feel free to come in and spew your aerosols all over everybody else because that's more important than saying, "Hey, please, for the love of God, wear a mask so we can go back to a room to see images with strangers." Like that's to me that seems like the bare minimum of what these companies should be doing, and they're not doing that. And like it's everything. It's the government response at the state level and even federal level, like to all of this. The private companies just want to go back into business. Nobody's actually doing the work to kind of fix the pandemic. So yeah, it's tough. I don't feel so bad for AMC anymore.
A big switcheroo from the days
Mhm.
when the business decision is to vouch for the safety of their business. Now they're saying we'll take anyone.
Well,
We'll
now
take
they're saying
anyone.
the safety of their business as in the numbers, as
Yes,
in
exactly.
not the
Yeah,
safety of the actual
the
customer. Yeah.
customers exactly. And to go on a little bit of a tangent,
Mhm.
there was a big thing on Twitter. I want to get your thoughts on.
Sure.
Someone posted a screenshot of a behind the scenes from Black Widow. It's not big spoiler, but it's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
scene where Yelena and Black Widow are having a conversation at a bench, right? And the viral tweet was the comparison of the behind the scenes shot and the finished shot in the film. And the behind the scenes shot had this focus, as a tight on Florence Pugh with a blue screen background,
Oh my
and
god.
oh
Yeah.
my god, right? And the finished shot, as people saw in the film, was them on having a conversation,
Can you believe
wherever they
movies use
were.
green screen effects?
But
Amazing.
so the immediate gut response, I think, fell in two categories. There was this
Mhm.
one camp that was like, "Wow, effects are so seamless that no one you didn't even know that the background was composited in, and that's how seamless effects are. So don't knock special effects and visual effects because you sometimes." All you're
For
knocking
sure.
is going to be bad implementation, but they're everywhere. They're part
Mhm.
of the business. It's how filmmaking works today.
And to me,
And then
like
the
I think the bigger example though is the suits, right? The suits from the MCU and
yes,
the
oh my
Avengers
god,
movie. Nobody's
yeah.
wearing suits because it's
No
all
one knew,
digitally
and no
mapped,
one knew, right?
and no
No
one
one
knew.
knew until it was
Yep.
pointed out after the fact. Like,
Yep.
that's just a great testament to, the just how filmmaking,
Yeah.
how it can be fluid and how it can be versatile, and how convincing the effects
Mhm.
are these days.
And much harder than
Uh,
the background. We've
yeah,
done
oh
green screen
yeah,
effects
they're moving.
forever.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But the other hot take, of course, is why would Marvel do this? Why not go on location? Why is everything fake? Why is everything fake? Which is, of course, got a
Sure.
lot of people riled up. Purists, quote unquote, in filmmaking. They
They
love
have a
ragging
lot to
on
learn
Marvel.
from the history of Hollywood, like
So
sound stages and
yeah.
whatnot. Yeah.
The context here, and thankfully a lot of
Mhm.
actual people who've made films chimed in, was that a very powerful thing and a smart thing to do when you're filming is
Mhm.
when you're on location, which they absolutely were at some point on location,
Mhm.
film your scenes, but for every shot of your film, also it takes literally minutes. Get an extra shot of a clean plate, which is to
Yep.
say, not without the actors in place, just the same camera movements, the same lighting of just the background. Because having that extra asset of the background can save you down the line
Mhm.
when reshoots are needed, when reshoots are possible, when actors can't fly to location, and you can then
Yep.
add scenes. And then so the conversation became, okay, I get that, but then why are reshoots necessary? Aren't reshoots this bad thing in Hollywood that are a sign of problems of the filmmaking, of the film, and the need to fix it? And that's, again, I think, a misunderstanding of the filmmaking process
People,
because
it's such a this whole thing is a perfect Twitter storm too because it's like instant provocation, instant like outrage fuel, but also very little context for what is
yes,
happening and what you're seeing and the nuances of this. So yeah, anybody who has made movies or knows about movie making it's like, yeah, I guess it would be nice if she was actually in a place, but it's not necessary. It doesn't that has nothing to do with the defining value of that scene, or that movie. I like Black Widow a lot. And I think there are script issues and there are other issues that kind of hold that movie back from being truly great. But let's focus on that, folks, like because that matters more than a green screen background.
I think what people worry about, and it goes back to the
Hmm.
Suicide Squad discussion, is this fear that scripts are reworked. And even if there's a kind of a tacit understanding that reshoots are part of the filmmaking process and filmmaking is fluid, that post is just
Yep.
as important as the screenwriting process, as the production, as filming in helping craft a story, the fear and the gut response is that studio intervention or executive intervention forces reshoots or forces new shots and new dialogue to to check a box for an audience score,
Hmm.
or to make something, to add a quip and a takeaway from a pure vision of a writer or a director, and certainly that can be the case, but
Sometimes, yeah.
that's not but that's not a blanket statement to say that every
Hmm.
reshoot is the result of poor filmmaking or studio intervention. Reshoots are by nature part of the process,
Yeah,
and
sometimes you have to redo something. Sometimes you take a shot and the way somebody's eyes move, or the way a line is delivered, or you just change the script a little. Like there are a lot of reasons why you want to change things. For a
yeah.
lot of films, they fundamentally rework plot mechanics too. And you look at filmmakers like I think Terrence Malick, and others who the way they work is even more organic. Not everybody works even from a defined script level. That's less and less common these days. But improv comedies, improv films, and stuff like there are a lot of ways that you can handle this process. It's yeah, it's there's a lot of having been in this industry or the media industry so long, covering entertainment, it's really funny to see like people come back to the same things being the major issues, whereas there are genuine issues, folks, like genuine issues around equality, and diversity, and the way like film crews are treated, and the way that FX studios are treated in this
Oh my
industry. they're
gosh, yeah.
they're dying. um we really have to be able to see like the actual issues going on here and not focus on these minor things. Yeah.
Yeah, and even for animated films, anyone
Yep.
who's watched the highly recommend on Disney Plus making of Frozen 2 documentary series that they made. It shows you for a film that you think must be locked because it's
Hmm.
animated is so fluid in the last year, where they have, yes, there are set pieces and things that they are getting their animators to work on, but entire scenes and songs are being rewritten and cut out and put in,
Hmm.
up until the last minute, to service the emotion and story. And Christopher McQuarrie talks about this a lot too. He'll write scenes on the way to set, because they're and having a break, having more time, because
Hmm.
filmmakers never have enough time. These things
Yep.
are expensive productions, and it's a miracle that any of these are made. So
Were you talking
you
about
know
Christopher McQuarrie, the Mission Impossible
McQuarrie, yeah,
director?
yeah,
McQuarrie.
yeah,
I was
exactly,
I was going to
yeah.
bring him up too because like the way he talks about making those movies is like he gets ideas for a set piece, right? Or he talks about something with Tom Cruise, and they're like, "Yeah, that's cool. Let's make that happen in the movie." And then in a way, the entire movie kind of revolves around that. He is basically doing like action movie jazz, which
Oh my gosh,
I
it is
love.
100%.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
Mission
just like
Impossible is
yeah,
4 action pieces that is
yep.
like, throw these 4 action pieces at the wall, and then we'll figure out how they connect. He loves that little problem
Hmm.
solving, and if there are
And the miracle is it
logicals,
works. Yeah,
it works. But, and logicals are
yeah,
okay,
yep.
because we hear so often, like, this refrain that it's about story, 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 but for him, it's actually emotion, emotion, emotion.
Hmm.
As long as the movie lands and you feel emotional impact, it's okay. You're happy. The filmmaker,
Emotion,
the film,
character, momentum, to storytelling wise. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Then the fact that the plot holes are there is not. It doesn't ruin the
It's
film.
literally
You
every
know.
spy movie. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So, want to go on that little tangent. I want to get your thoughts on that. Of course, having you as a guest here. Our
Mhm.
last topic, and we'll maybe touch on this a little bit quickly so we can get everyone out of here, is Apple. Apple's new child safety initiatives, which I think there are, again, a lot of hot takes and
Mhm.
not clarity. Apple certainly has not done its part well to help clarify this, as they just dropped the announcement. But you may have seen the headlines. Apple will start scanning your photos, or Apple will, is taking
They're
steps to
invading your
infringe on
privacy
privacy. Oh my
already.
goodness,
Yeah.
right? They just did a whole ad campaign about how they respect your privacy. How dare they?
Mhm.
So let's get the information out there as to what they're actually doing and where the slippery slopes may be, because I think there absolutely are some potential slippery slopes here. So this is all about um, photos and the new way they're implementing in iOS to prevent abuse of children and find where there are potential abuses of children in photos, like specifically like child pornography.
Mhm.
And there are two different systems, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one is in messages, and this is if you have your family under an account.
Yeah, a
So, like,
shared
we both
iCloud
have
account.
children, a
Yep.
shared iCloud account where two parents have children in the household, and they're all paid under one account, and the children are sending messages. and the parents don't maybe have a direct way to
Mhm.
monitor that message. Neither does Apple because they're end-to-end encrypted, right? If the child is sending messages and receives or sends photos that have content that the image detecting algorithms
Mhm.
on iOS on the phone itself detect and flag, then the parents can get notified
And
about
that
that.
one is detecting nudity. It is detecting things that they assume are, yeah, naked images, basically. Yeah.
And that's where there's image detection
Mhm.
algorithms not done in the cloud but done on the phone, but where the cloud thing factors in is it has to be under a family account
Mhm.
where you opt into this service as a family to monitor who your children may be having conversations with, because that is a real concern
Yep.
in today's terrible world. What that's different from is the iCloud iPhoto storage scanning service, which is not about actually doing image detection in a traditional sense, computer vision. So it's not doing what you would do with with Google of like, tell me what's in this picture. Is it a puppy? Is it a boat? It's not doing that, but every photo has what they call a fingerprint, like a unique identifier that can be locked to a photo regardless if the photo has been cropped, scaled, adjusted in any way. There's some core elements that tell you
Mhm.
this is this photo, NFT style, we'll call it, right? This is like this photo. And what iCloud is doing is it's taking across all of iPhoto, it's scanning for these fingerprints, and not the quote visual content,
Yeah.
but the
The
digital fingerprint of
hash.
these
Yeah.
photos, the hash of
Mhm.
this photo, and referencing to a federal database of photos that are illegal, that have that do harm to children.
Mhm. And
And
some of
when
these things have been traded for decades. Like these are images that have
yes,
existed, that they've been passed around. It's an epidemic. Like it's an ongoing thing that has existed since the internet has been a thing. Yeah.
And when these photos are matched with the fingerprints, and it passes a threshold, some criminal has more than an X number of these photos on their iCloud, then it's flagged to Apple, and Apple can notify the authorities, uh, and point them to this
Mhm.
person.
Mhm.
So those are, while in the same pursuit of the same safety measure, they are two fundamentally different types of image identifying technologies. One happening locally on the device, one happening in the cloud. The one happening in the cloud that's quote unquote scanning the photos are referencing the hash of the photos, not
Yeah.
analyzing and looking at your photos and identifying, oh, a photo of you giving your kid a bath, for
Mhm.
example. That hopefully clarifies. And I think that's an appropriate interpretation of what they put out.
Mhm.
But the slippery slope here is, of course, the fingerprinting doesn't have to be to this database of
Right.
child pornography. The fingerprinting can apply theoretically to any photo, to
Mhm.
photos of of pro democracy imagery, of Tiananmen Square in
Mhm.
China, right? Of things that some governments may find unsuitable for their populations, and Apple says that they will say no, and they will not allow governments to tap into this iPhoto scanning to technology. But in the past, Apple has caved to governments, like
Mhm.
to China specifically,
Especially China.
about
Yeah. Mhm.
about allowing the governments to have the access to iPhotos and
Mhm.
iCloud storage
Yeah.
keys and decryption keys stored
Because
in China.
yeah, stored in China, the government basically can get access to it whenever. Apple has worked really hard to like kind of extricate itself from managing that data, but it seems really fishy. Like it's weird for a company that's so deep on privacy and talks about how secure they are to just open up for that.
Right. And then it's kind of like trust us
Yeah.
mentality of like we're doing this in your best interests, but at the same time,
Hmm.
when push comes to shove and what's at stake for them is a billion person marketplace, they will cave but not make a big deal of it,
Hmm.
in the best terms
Yeah.
possible
It took
to a government.
reporting. It took like New York Times reporting, I think, to really
Yeah.
unearth like how deep and how how weird that situation was with China, because Apple never, they're not going to announce like, oh yeah, this is how we're making data available in China, by basically sending it over to this third party company the government can fully get access to.
So I think,
Hmm.
while their intentions here are, their implementation, I think that a lot of what
Hmm.
also rubs security experts the wrong way is that they did, this has been a hotly
Hmm.
discussed topic of how to implement this,
Right.
this photo scanning or fingerprinting for good purposes, for well-intentioned purposes of
Hmm.
protecting children, and Apple kind of, in a very Apple way, decided on their own they're just
Hmm.
going to implement it their way
Because
and trust us. This is the
yeah,
best way.
other cloud services actually scan images on the cloud. That is not what
Yeah.
Apple is doing here. Like, it is local device detection. It is searching for hashes. So it is worrisome, but if you look at what Google or Facebook or pretty much any other company is doing already, it's less of an issue, I'd say. I'm
I think
of
it's
two
about
minds.
expectation,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
about, like, if Apple's putting out one message in a big ad campaign saying, "We don't
Mhm.
look at any of your stuff," and
And they're
then
not.
in the
They're
same
not
and in the same breath,
technically.
but they're
Yeah.
also saying, "Technically, we're not, but also
Yep.
we're doing this thing.
Mhm.
Trust us, we're gonna keep you safe." One, there's a conflation of what these
Sure.
technologies
Sure.
are, which we're trying to clarify. But two, for a lot of people, they're
Mhm.
not gonna care, but the people who are loudest about it
Yep.
and the people who are informed and are loudest about it, need to be empowered to keep Apple
Mhm.
in check, to make sure that they're not
Mhm.
caving to governments and they're not stepping beyond the bounds of what they promise. Because
Mhm.
what they're doing now, if they stick to what they say, I think it's a good thing.
Mhm.
We know policies change all the time.
Yep.
We know they're not always, made public and how they change. And that's why it's up to reporting, and it's
Mhm.
up to investigative journalism, and it's up to security experts who have a better understanding than either of us about
Mhm.
how these things work to bring these things to light.
we
So
need we need a free press. We need experts who are here to keep these companies accountable. I will say, like, it's a tough decision for Apple right now, because I think, according to the current reporting, like, every other company out there is doing more towards alerting authorities of child pornography. Facebook, I believe, sends like tens of thousands of notices
yeah,
to law enforcement, and I think the New York Times said like Apple sent less than 100, like, not very much. So this is an actual problem. Like, if you're not aware of what's going on here, like, there's a vast underground network of people trading pornographic images of children.
yeah.
And I find that particularly, I guess, more worrying now that I'm a father too, and I'm sure you feel this way too, Norm. Like, kids are so vulnerable. This stuff is out there, and I do think we need to do everything we can to kind of prevent this from spreading. At the same time, you have to balance the potential harm for going too far. But to me, this is better than not doing anything at all. Like, what Apple has
Yeah.
been doing, may have been the most privacy oriented thing, but it's also like, giving people enough privacy to do really nefarious things that harm children. And to me, that's like, you can't really argue for that at all. Yeah.
All this stuff, whether it's from Google, Facebook, or Apple,
Hmm.
all these issues that arise are, byproducts of scale. The
Hmm.
fact that they have products that they're making for billions of people because they have achieved the scale with, there's sometimes good and valuable products that they offer, and yet they don't often not oftentimes these companies want the responsibility
Hmm.
of what comes with that scale. Happy to take in the profits, happy to take in all the money, and happy to address and kind of put fires out, when they arise. But these are fundamental
Hmm.
core issues when they have products that reach so many people, that permeate so many people's lives, and that kind of responsibility it's almost like anti Silicon Valley. There's like a lot
Hmm.
of this like libertarianism idealism, that the marketplace will sort itself out, or that that it's not their responsibility, and that privacy or free speech is the thing that matters the most. And yes, to a certain extent, we value those freedoms as well, but there's also a huge
Yeah.
responsibility
Yeah.
when these platforms and systems are things that private companies are in
Hmm.
control of.
You can't be too naive about this. Like, you create a big enough network, people are going to use it for nefarious purposes, and you have to have pushback there, and you have to protect the most vulnerable people in our society. Like, that's it. Full stop. You
Yeah.
got to do what you can to stop this, because it's horrific if you read about like some of these images that are out there. So, yeah, I'm not going to be. I am mainly an iPhone user. I test out Android devices all the time. This isn't going to like push me to go to Android. I've read some, some folks who are like, they're not super into this. They may switch to Android. I don't like, you're not going to have a much better security experience on the Android side of things, especially if Google is doing actual scanning of, photo libraries on their
as a
clouds.
feature.
Yeah,
As a feature, right? As a long-standing feature of iPhoto, and people are happy to opt in for that,
Mhm.
but also happy to have the security benefits of them,
Mhm.
sending reports to the right authorities, uh, and the fact that their business model as a
Mhm.
company is advertising,
Yep, yep,
is
for
data
sure.
acquisition.
Yeah, and you're talking about Google there. So yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Totally,
Yeah,
totally makes sense.
yeah.
For Apple, I do think like there have been some stories of them like pushing back from the FBI's request to open up, locked iPhones. Like that is good stuff, and I do feel like they need to push more against things like that. But at the same time, like Tim Cook's argument for being in China is like we're better off being here in the market, in the conversation, rather than
Right.
being on the outside criticizing it. And I don't know if that's necessarily true, because Apple is so reliant on China, right? Most of their devices are built there now. They're reliant on the supply chain. They're reliant on so many things out of China, where I can't imagine even Apple having the power to criticize the Chinese government or pushing back on anything, which is why they've come up with this. You should all read that New York Times reporting
Hmm.
about how Apple and China are like coexisting.
The
You know,
symbiotic relationship has
yeah.
been beneficial for one side more than the other for a
Hmm.
long time, but now the it's kind of been the other way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm not as worried about the child pornography stuff. I'm glad Apple's doing more. And I do think like, hey, we have a ton of people out here who are genuinely have all these like child pornography conspiracy theories going on. Like the QAnon stuff is based on conspiracy, but when it comes to like doing the things it actually takes to protect kids, it is funny. Like we get less support for that sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. As a parent, I will be opting into the feature.
Yes.
Put it that way.
Hmm.
All right. Thank you, Devendra, so much for guesting on this week's episode.
Thank you.
And where can people find where your stuff is?
Where can you find me? I'm on Twitter at Devendra. Right at Engadget. I will be back there starting next week. I do the Engadget podcast, and we also do the Filmcast, my movie
Filmcast.
podcast. The Filmcast. So
That's
Google that. We're on Patreon. We're all over. I believe we're just thefilmcast.com as well. I need to double check that URL. But yeah, we are the Filmcast. So check us out if you want to hear me rant more about movies. We actually just reviewed The Green Knight, and along with that, we reviewed Excalibur, a movie I loved, and The Last
Borman's
Temptation,
Excalibur.
Borman's Excalibur, which is fantastic, even though it's so weird, and The Last Temptation of Christ, two movies that kind of influence and impact The Green Knight. I didn't like The Last Temptation of Christ as much, but it was worth watching. And yeah, go check out our conversation.
All right. And always, as always, you can find us on Tesla.com and on YouTube as well. Thanks, everyone, for listening. I'll say goodbye for Jeremy as well, and we'll see you next time.
Hi there, I didn't see you.
Tested. Just one story this week. What were you guys doing 1.8 billion years ago?
Floating around the universe in various forms.
Tested.